Marcus stood at the edge of the family room, watching everyone raise their glasses to Colin. The perfect son, the golden twin, laughter echoed beneath the chandelier as relatives clinked champagne flutes and praised his inheritance of their father's estate. The house, the company, the family car. Even the dog that once followed Marcus as a boy had now curled up at Colin's feet. Marcus didn't say a word. He didn't expect much, but he didn't expect what he got either. A white envelope. No seal, no gold-trimmed paper, just his name written in a hurried scrawl. Inside a note with 5 words, Noah Shelter 218 Albuquerque, go. That was it. No context, no apology, no signature, like a command or a confession. He read it twice, then again, and still no one looked at him. There had always been an unspoken script in the family. Colin would inherit the legacy. Marcus would inherit the silence. From the day he came out at 17, and their father's voice cracked with the words, "You'll never be like him," the roles had been cast. At holidays, Marcus sat further from the table. At weddings, his name was misspelled on place cards, if it appeared at all. But this was the final scene, in the envelope. Whatever it was felt less like a gift and more like a leftover. He didn't ask Colin if he knew who Noah was. He didn't ask anyone. They'd already gone back to laughter, back to toast, back to stories that never included him. Marcus left that night with only his coat, the letter, and a question that wouldn't stop burning. Who was Noah? He drove south. No plan, no luggage, just an ache. And for the first time in years, it wasn't about not being loved. It was about what had been buried because his father, a man who never said "I'm proud," had left him something or someone, and that was enough to follow. He passed deserts and motels, rest stops, stranger ears, miles stretched into silence. Somewhere along the journey, he realized this wasn't just about Noah. It was about whether a man who'd spent his life being not enough could show up for someone else, not to fix them, but to hold space for them. By the time he pulled into Shelter 218, the sun was already bleeding into the New Mexico sky. The building was plain stucco, cracked paint, a chain-link fence. A kid in a hoodie watched him park and said nothing. Inside, the air smelled like paper towels and old grief. At the front desk, a woman asked if he was a relative. He hesitated, then replied, "I don't know yet." Heart Stories is a home for stories that aren't always heard, but always felt. If this beginning moved, you follow us to discover what Marcus finds and what it means to carry someone else's name when yours was never called. Noah was sitting alone in the far corner of the rec room, hood-up headphones and sketching on the back of a diner menu. The staff told Marcus he'd been there for 3 months. No family listed, no school records past the 9th grade. Quiet, doesn't start fights, doesn't make friends. One staff member shrugged, said, "Some kids just disappear while still breathing." Marcus didn't approach right away. He watched Noah, never looked up unless someone raised their voice. He flinched at closing doors. He slept with his shoes on, and his sketching, always people but never faces. Later that day, a caseworker handed Marcus a file. Inside was a single page from over a decade ago, a termination letter signed by Marcus's father firing an office assistant for unprofessional conduct. The assistant's name was Daniela Ruiz, Noah's mother. Marcus read it again and again, stunned at how easily history had been erased with a signature. He'd been a teenager when she worked there, barely noticed her. But the date of the termination matched exactly 9 months before Noah's birth. Daniela had died 2 years ago, from complications after untreated diabetes. No insurance, no family came to claim Noah. He was placed in the system and then bounced around. Marcus understood now the boy was his father's son. Not by love, not by acknowledgement, but by blood and by silence. He wanted to speak to Noah. Say something, anything. But what do you tell a child your father abandoned? That you're sorry, that you didn't know, that even when you weren't the chosen son, you still carried the privilege of being known. He sat across the room the next day, left a sandwich between them, said nothing. The 3rd day, he brought a deck of cards. On the 5th, he just read a book out loud. Not to Noah, just into the air. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. It was raining outside, a rare New Mexico downpour. The power flickered. One of the younger boys began to cry. Noah stood up wordless and handed the boy a flashlight, then sat back down. It was the first time Marcus saw his face in full light. The eyes, the jawline, even the way his fingers held a pencil. So familiar it made Marcus nauseous. He remembered watching his father draw building plans late at night in their garage, How he gripped the pencil like it could splinter from the weight of what he couldn't say. Noah had that same grip. That night, Marcus knocked on Noah's door and asked gently if he could join him for a walk. Noah didn't speak but followed. They walked a full block in silence. At one point, Marcus said, "I think I knew your mom. She worked for my family a long time ago." Noah didn't stop walking. He just said flatly, "She cried a lot." Marcus nodded. Sometimes crying is what's left when no one will let you scream. They didn't talk again that night. But the next morning, Noah was waiting by the front desk before Marcus arrived. Hoodie down, eyes wary, sketch pad in hand. He handed Marcus a drawing. It was crude, shaded in pencil, but the image was clear. Two figures sitting on a bench under a sky full of scribbled rain. One was smaller. One had his arms stretched out, shielding the other, with nothing but his sleeve. No signature, no name. Just the drawing. Marcus didn't cry, but something inside him bent. The way wood bends in heat, quietly, permanently. He spent the following days with shelter staff asking what it would take to start the guardianship process. He wasn't a biological parent. No paperwork, no proof. Just a man trying to offer what had been denied safety without strings. But more than that, he was a man trying to prove something to himself, that being gay didn't mean he couldn't nurture. That he didn't need his father's legacy to create one of his own. That someone like him, someone always left outside the door, could choose to hold the door open anyway. For the first time, he wasn't chasing his father's approval. He was choosing a different story. One with shelter, one with thunder, one with a boy who wouldn't look up until someone knelt down to see him. When Colin called, Marcus knew it wouldn't be good. The voicemail was clipped, almost amused. "Heard you're playing daddy now. You always did like drama." No mention of Noah's name, no curiosity, just that bitter familiarity Marcus had come to expect. Like Colin believed he was still the only one entitled to carry the family name, just as their father once did. Marcus didn't respond. He had more pressing things to do. The guardianship process moved slowly, tangled in red tape and suspicion. Single male, gay. No previous parenting history. The social worker assigned to his case didn't say it aloud, but her hesitance showed in every glance. Marcus wasn't surprised. He had lived this script before in schools, churches, even within his own bloodline. The idea that someone like him could offer safety, let alone love, was still a foreign concept to too many. But he kept showing up to every interview, every background check, every uncomfortable question. Because Noah had begun leaving his door open at night just slightly. Because once when Marcus overslept, Noah knocked on his door with breakfast, burnt toast, and scrambled eggs that tasted like pencil shavings. And because one afternoon when they walked past a park, Noah pointed at a swing set and said softly, "I used to go there before people started watching too closely." They never talked about what that meant, but Marcus understood. He knew what it felt like to live in constant performance, how to walk straighter, laugh, quieter, dress, safer. He knew what it was to calculate safety in public, who was watching, how close the exits were, which version of yourself was acceptable in that moment. That knowledge, unspoken but lived, had become the bridge between them still. Colin's shadow loomed. One Sunday, Marcus took Noah to the old family house, just to drive past it, the place they both had been denied in different ways. The estate now stood like a monument to control, the lawn surgically trimmed, the windows too clean. No curtains moved, no signs of life, just glass and silence. Noah stared. "You lived there." Marcus hesitated. "I slept there, living is a different thing." He didn't explain further. He didn't talk about the hallway lined with awards. None with his name or the Christmas. He was given a sweater 3 sizes too small, while Colin unwrapped a car key. Or the time their father caught Marcus holding hands with a boy behind the bleachers and made him scrub the garage floor until midnight. To remind you of your place. They drove on. Back at Marcus's apartment, Noah sat quietly at the kitchen table while Marcus cooked. There was something unusually still about him. He reached into his backpack and placed a worn notebook on the table. "You can read it," he said, barely audible. "It's hers." But inside were pages of his mother's handwriting, thoughts, prayers, poetry, and memories of a man with hands too clean and a voice full of locked doors. A man who promised help if she disappeared quietly. A man who gave her a check and a warning. A man she couldn't bring herself to hate because part of him lived inside her son. On the one page she'd written, "If one day someone comes for you, Noah, let them. Not everyone wants to fix you. Some just want to stay." Marcus closed the notebook slowly. It felt heavier than it was. The next morning, he received a letter. A legal notice Colin had filed for an injunction claiming concern over family reputation and well-being, tied to Marcus's public involvement with the shelter system. There were whispers of press involvement, hints that Marcus was fabricating a story to exploit sympathy. It didn't surprise him. Colin had always known how to twist a wound into a weapon. But for the first time in his life, Marcus didn't shrink. He printed every form he needed, filed a counterstatement, and submitted his intent to proceed with full guardianship of Noah. Not because of defiance, but because of love. Not because he needed to win, but because someone needed to lose the silence. That evening, Noah found Marcus sitting on the floor back against the fridge, staring at the approval forms. He sat beside him, knees pulled to his chest. After a while, he asked, "Are you scared?" Marcus looked at him and replied, "Yes, but I'm not going anywhere." Noah nodded at once, then slowly he leaned into Marcus's side. They stayed like that. Two people never meant to meet, building something. Their bloodline never gave them a home without performance, a bond without condition. It started with a thunderstorm, the kind that cracked through the sky without warning, drowning the city in silver and shaking windows loose from sleep. Marcus had never liked storms. As a boy, he would count the seconds between lightning and thunder, as if measuring fear might contain it. That night, he was up organizing documents for Noah's guardianship hearing school records, shelter transcripts, witness letters, when the power flickered and went out. Noah was already awake, sitting on the floor with a flashlight under his chin like a makeshift campfire. He offered a smirk and said, "Your building needs better wiring." Marcus chuckled, but the storm kept tugging at something deeper. Memories he hadn't invited. By candlelight, he found himself going through a box he hadn't opened in years. Personal things salvaged from their father's study after the funeral. Most of it was what he expected. Ledgers, awards, business cards. But at the bottom, beneath a stiff, untouched Bible and an unused leather journal, lay a thin envelope. It was sealed. The handwriting on it was rigid and deliberate, almost angry. To be opened only if he follows through. There was no date, no name, but it was addressed in his father's handwriting. Marcus hesitated. The silence of the room shifted, tense, expectant. He broke the seal. Inside was a short letter written in sharper pen strokes than the first. The tone wasn't sentimental. It read more like a confession drafted for a priest who never showed up. "If Marcus is reading this, then he did what I never could. He stayed. He saw the boy. He didn't look away. I wronged Daniela. I destroyed her life for convenience, not justice, and I left a child to grow up learning to disappear. I won't ask forgiveness, but I can leave a truth. The boy is my son. He is Marcus's brother. But more than that, he is the only thing I've done that deserves to last." Beneath the letter was a folded photo, a Polaroid of a younger Noah, perhaps 5 years old, on Daniela's lap. The background was their company's holiday party, streamers, trays of food, blurred executives. In the corner, slightly out of focus, was their father. Not posing, just watching. Eyes fixed on the child. Face unreadable. Marcus didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain wasn't new. It had just found a different shape. He placed the photo on the table and stared at it for a long time. The room still smelled of old books and burnt wax. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up in his hoodie, a pencil still tucked behind one ear. There, in that stillness, Marcus felt it settle, the weight of bloodlines, the cruelty of legacy, and the strange redemptive ache of becoming more than what you inherited. The next day, he brought the letter and photo to the shelter. Not to prove anything, he'd already earned custody in every way that mattered, but to update Noah's file. As he handed the documents to the administrator, the woman paused. "You know," she said gently, "he started drawing faces last week. He used to avoid eyes, mouths. Now every face is full." Marcus smiled. "Maybe he's learning people don't always leave." She looked at him closely. Or maybe someone finally stayed long enough to be drawn. That evening, Marcus cooked dinner. Noah's favorite pasta with too much cheese and garlic bread, too crisp on the edges. They ate on the couch watching a documentary about whales. Afterward, Marcus handed Noah the envelope. "I found this last night," he said. "It's about you." From him, Noah stared at the seal, fingers hovering, then slowly pushed it back. "I don't need it," he said. "I've got you." Marcus didn't press. He just kept the letter on the shelf between a framed drawing and a calendar Noah had made for him from printer paper and colored pencils. Later, Noah came into Marcus's room without knocking. Something new. He stood there a second, uncertain, then asked, If I ever change my name, can I use yours? The words dropped like stones in still water. Marcus nodded, voice caught in his throat. You don't have to earn it. It's yours if you want it. Noah said nothing more. He just climbed into bed beside him, not as a child clinging to comfort, but as someone finally choosing their place. Outside the storm had passed, the windows were still damp, but the air had changed inside a boy and a man. Neither chosen, both forged lay under the same roof. Not by tradition, not by obligation, but by a bond deeper than blood, the decision to stay. The hearing was scheduled quietly without press. Colin never showed. He had sent a lawyer, of course, a young man with a tight jaw and a sharper suit who presented a file of vague concerns about Marcus's lifestyle, lack of experience, instability, the usual coded barbs. No open homophobia, just the cold polish of corporate disapproval. But Marcus didn't need to defend himself. The caseworker from Shelter 218 spoke on his behalf. A teacher from Noah's new school submitted a letter. And Noah, now more composed than any teenager had the right to be, stood in front of the judge and said clearly, Marcus didn't rescue me. He just didn't leave. And sometimes that's more powerful than saving someone. The guardianship was approved. No appeals, no conditions outside the courthouse. The sky was overcast but calm. Noah stepped onto the steps, blinking at the light, then turned to Marcus and simply asked, Can we go home? Months passed. Slowly, the shape of their life grew roots. Marcus rearranged the apartment, turning his small art room into Noah's bedroom. They bought secondhand furniture, argued over music, and created a Sunday ritual of bad movies and better pancakes. One afternoon while Noah was at school, Marcus received a delivery, a courier suit pressed sunglasses indoors. He left behind a leather briefcase and a note. From the Colin estate, Marcus opened it cautiously. Inside were three things: a formal resignation letter from Colin to the company board, a deed transfer for the family house, with Marcus now listed as sole owner, and finally a short note, handwritten, signed by Colin. I don't know what Dad saw in you. Maybe it was what I tried so hard not to see. You stayed soft when he tried to make you hard. You kept heart when he taught us shame. I'm not proud of much, but I'm glad you got the kid. He deserves someone like you. I never did. There was no apology, but something heavier surrender. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't call or reply. He simply folded the letter and placed it next to the one from their father, now both kept in a wooden box on his desk. Letters never mailed in life, but sent in other ways. That weekend, he drove Noah out to the old family home, not to reclaim it, just to see it one last time. The front gate creaked when they opened it. The house looked smaller now, less like a fortress, more like a shell. Inside, it was still staged with empty pride-framed diplomas, untouched books, rooms full of heirlooms with no real heirs. In the backyard, Noah stood beneath the willow tree. Marcus and Colin had once climbed as boys. He traced the bark with his fingers, then turned and asked, Will we live here? Marcus shook his head. No, it's not built for the kind of people we are. Instead, they took what mattered. Old photo albums with missing pages, a few books from their mother's library, a sketch Marcus had done as a child still taped to the back of a door, and from the attic, an antique sign their grandfather had once carved, Grant Family, Built to Last. Marcus took the sign home and repainted it with Noah, but they changed the words. Now it read Grant Home, Built to Belong. It was nailed above the entrance to their apartment, which might not have had grand ceilings or chandeliers, but held warmth that couldn't be inherited. Only chosen, only nurtured. Noah officially changed his name a few weeks later. Not legally yet, but on his school ID, his library card, even on his sketchbook cover, Noah Grant. At dinner one night, he slid a paper across the table, a drawing. It was of two figures standing side by side under a sky filled with small stars. One held a letter, the other held the hand of a child Noah had written at the bottom. I'm not your legacy, I'm your continuation. Marcus looked at the drawing for a long time before saying anything. No, he said softly, you're both. If someone gave you a letter that changed your entire story, would you open it? Or would you rather write your own? Follow Heart Stories for more stories that prove family isn't who names you, it's who stays. And sometimes the greatest inheritance is the freedom to be loved as you are.